What if Ghana detains 17 soldiers from Burkina Faso near Tumu and the consequences quietly reach your pocket in the United States through higher security spending and shaky energy markets? What if this Ghana-Burkina Faso border incident was not an accident, but a signal about who decides the rules in West Africa? Ibrahim Traoré has warned the region before. We do not plead for respect. We defend our territory. We do not bend to make powerful outsiders feel at ease. Here is the detail people cannot ignore. Locals say the soldiers did not merely cross the border. They stacked sandbags and marked out a controlled zone, as if something larger was about to unfold. Then Ghana detained them, and within hours diplomacy closed the matter. Stay with me because you are about to see why this quiet moment at the border matters far more than it appears. Before we go deeper, do one thing with me. If you believe no country should be bullied on its own land, type New Africa in the comments. And if you want more stories that show how power moves when the cameras are off, like, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next phase of this standoff is where the real cost shows up. Ghana's Upper West region is not a place most Americans could locate on a map. It is open, dry land where roads turn to dust quickly. Where small communities like Wuru sit on the edge of everything. And that is exactly why this story matters. Border zones like this are where West Africa's real power struggles appear first, long before they reach capital cities and long before Washington pays attention. On January 1, 2025, residents around Wuru near the town of Tumu saw something that felt wrong. A group of soldiers from Burkina Faso had crossed into Ghana. Not one or two confused men. Not a lost patrol. 17 soldiers. And instead of turning back, they behaved as if the road belonged to them. Sandbags. A perimeter. A posture that told locals, do not ask questions, keep moving. So the residents did the one thing that changes outcomes in places like this. They spoke up. They raised the alarm. Ghanaian authorities responded fast, not with noise but with quiet urgency. The soldiers were detained, questioned, and released in under 4 hours. Because Ghana and Burkina Faso still shared something many neighbors in the region no longer have. A way to step back before pride turns into a crisis. But one question refuses to disappear. If this was nothing, why did it look like the opening of an operation? Early reports say the 17 Burkina Faso soldiers crossed into Ghana in the Wuru community near Tumu, inside the Sisala East district of the Upper West region. This is not a crowded border crossing. It is the kind of place where strangers stand out immediately, where every unfamiliar vehicle is noticed, where a uniform can change the mood of a village in seconds. According to locals, the moment the soldiers arrived, it did not look like a friendly mistake. They spread out. They held ground. They worked the area with purpose. Then came the detail that made residents nervous enough to call for help. Sandbags laid out like a rough checkpoint, forming a controlled zone. The community raised the alarm. Ghanaian customs and security officers moved in quickly. No speeches. No social media noise. Just a fast response to a situation that could have spun out of control if anyone made the wrong move. The soldiers were taken into custody, questioned, and held long enough for Ghana to decide what this situation was and what it was not. Then just as suddenly it was over. The detention lasted less than 4 hours, and the issue was handled quietly through diplomatic channels between Ghana and Burkina Faso. But a clean timeline does not mean a clean truth. The real question is not how fast Ghana acted. The real question is why those 17 soldiers felt comfortable acting at all. This is what makes the incident feel less like a wrong turn and more like a message. Trained soldiers who cross a border by mistake do not start building. They do not fortify. They do not behave like they have authority over a road that is not theirs. Yet witnesses say that is exactly what happened. As the new year began, these 17 Burkina Faso soldiers were not standing around. They were positioning themselves. They stacked sandbags. They shaped a small, defensive-style point meant to control movement. And some reports say they carried serious military equipment, including firearms and suspected explosives. That detail matters. Because it shifts the question from who got lost to who was this meant for and who gave them confidence to act. Border communities understand the difference between a passing patrol and a unit preparing to hold ground. A patrol lets you pass. A unit building a perimeter tells you the rules have changed. That is why residents reacted immediately. They did not wait for rumors. In places like Wuru, hesitation can cost lives. One misunderstanding. One shot. One officer refusing to back down. And suddenly the story is no longer about 17 men. It is about a region sliding toward crisis. Yes, Ghana detained them quickly. But the more unsettling question still hangs in the air. What did those soldiers expect to happen next? When Ghanaian customs and security personnel arrived, the atmosphere shifted instantly. In border areas, everyone knows one truth. When uniforms face uniforms, things can go wrong fast. The soldiers were disarmed, secured, and taken in for questioning. And notice Ghana's approach. No public spectacle. No press parade. No performance. Just a controlled response focused on one question. Why are you here? This happened on January 1, 2025. By then, West Africa already understood how quickly a small incident can become a national insult. Ghana needed clarity. Were these soldiers chasing someone? Looking for something? Sending a signal? Or was this truly a mistake that appeared more serious than it was? Interrogations like this are not always about punishment. Often they are about stopping a chain reaction. Ghana's priority was clear. Understand motive. Contact the right people across the border. Shut down escalation before rumors turned into fuel. The soldiers were held briefly, reportedly under 4 hours, before diplomatic channels resolved the issue quietly. Quiet resolution does not mean full explanation. It means both sides agreed it was safer not to air everything publicly. The speed became the headline. But the speed is also the clue. Border incidents involving armed troops rarely reset in a few hours. Usually they bring statements, accusations, public pressure, and pride-driven standoffs. So why did this one end so fast? It ended quickly because Ghana's leadership is choosing a different approach. Under President John Mahama, Ghana has signaled a desire to keep lines open with Sahel neighbors, even when regional politics are tense. That does not mean Ghana agrees with everything happening across the border. It means Ghana understands one reality. When you share borders, you either manage problems early or inherit them later. This is diplomacy used as a security tool without firing a shot. Reports say the soldiers were detained, questioned, and released quietly within hours. Outcomes like that happen when phones are answered, commanders speak, and leaders refuse to turn every incident into a performance. But there is another layer. Ghana is balancing relationships with global powers while trying to prevent its immediate neighborhood from slipping into open hostility. In today's West Africa, that balance is rare and fragile. So yes, Ghana handled it. But if Ghana had to move that quickly to extinguish the situation, the spark was real. Which brings us back to the question that will not go away. What did those 17 soldiers believe they were about to do before villagers intervened? Ghana is attempting something simple on paper and difficult in practice. Being friendly with everyone without becoming anyone's pawn. On one side, Ghana seeks stability with Burkina Faso and the wider Sahel. Because instability does not stay contained. It spills across borders as smuggling, displacement, armed groups, and constant fear. On the other side, Ghana remains connected to the global system. Accra is a diplomatic and logistics hub. Every move Ghana makes is read as a signal. When those 17 soldiers crossed into Wuru and began building a sandbag position, Ghana had two options. Make a public example and risk forcing Burkina Faso into a defensive response. Or contain it quickly, ask questions quietly, and end it before pride demanded escalation. Ghana chose containment. And while details vary across retellings, the pattern remains the same. A border incident. A rapid response. A quiet exit before public anger took control. When a country moves that fast, it is not being polite. It is trying to prevent the next incident from becoming uncontrollable. In late 2022, Ghana and Burkina Faso were not in this mode. Tensions rose after Ghana's former president Nana Akufo-Addo suggested Burkina Faso had brought in Russia's Wagner Group. Burkina Faso protested strongly, summoned Ghana's ambassador, and recalled its own ambassador from Accra. That was a warning, not cooperation. That history matters. Under the old rhythm, an incident like Wuru could have become proof of bad faith. It could have escalated into public confrontation, sanctions talk, and regional pressure. Instead, Ghana treated it like a fire to be extinguished before the wind shifted. This signals a deeper change. When countries change how they respond, it is because what they fear most has changed. ECOWAS was built on the promise that breaking democratic order would trigger regional pressure. In practice, this often means sanctions and public shaming while ordinary people absorb the damage. Border communities understand this well. Sanctions do not hit generals first. They hit traders, farmers, and transport workers. That is why Ghana's current posture feels like a quiet break from the old script. While institutions talk punishment, border communities live consequences. And the region is more fragile now that Burkina Faso and its Sahel partners have broken away to form their own bloc. When President John Mahama took office in January 2025, His message on regional cooperation was not empty language. It was a signal. Ghana will defend its borders without turning every incident into a crusade. If Ghana had followed the old reflex, loud condemnation and no private off-ramp, those 17 soldiers could have become symbols of humiliation. Burkina Faso would have been forced to respond publicly. Pride would have taken control. Instead, Ghana created a soft landing. A way out without turning it into a regional shouting match. Do not confuse restraint with weakness. Sometimes the strongest move is denying anyone the chance to turn a spark into a blaze. Now change one detail and watch the story collapse. Imagine those same 17 soldiers crossed into Ivory Coast. Same setup. Same sandbags. Same posture. Would Abidjan treat it as a misunderstanding solved in 4 hours? Unlikely. The relationship between Ivory Coast and Burkina Faso has been tense for years. In tense relationships, border incidents become evidence. Headlines follow. Political pressure grows. Backing down becomes impossible. In that scenario, villagers do not just call customs. Media arrives. Politicians speak of sovereignty. Demands for toughness rise. Quiet phone calls vanish. Public statements lock leaders into positions. When trust is gone, truth matters less than perception. Troops move. Trade slows. Prices rise. Civilians pay. This is why Ghana's response matters. West Africa is dry grass. In the wrong place at the wrong time, those 17 soldiers could have been the match. And the darker question follows. Who benefits if the fire spreads? Now imagine Nigeria instead. If 17 soldiers built a perimeter in a Nigerian border zone, the response would not be quiet. Nigeria and Niger share families, markets, and history. That closeness once kept things calm. After Niger's 2023 coup, suspicion replaced trust. Borders hardened. Familiarity vanished. In that environment, a small incident explodes. Social media erupts. Politicians compete to sound tough. Statements are written for pride, not peace. Miscalculation follows. A warning shot. A rumor. Mobilization. Disruption. Civilians suffer. This is why leadership matters. The difference is not geography. It is temperament. When temperament fails, the region pays long before distant capitals even learn the village's name. Look at the contrast. In Ghana, 17 armed soldiers crossed near Wuru and were released within hours. Weeks earlier in Burkina Faso, a Nigerian Air Force cargo plane made an emergency landing. Nigeria called it a safety issue. Burkina Faso treated it as a breach. Nigerian personnel were detained for days, not hours, until senior officials intervened. Same region. Same pride. Different outcomes. Because political temperature matters. When it is high, accidents become attacks. Ask yourself this. If Ghana had not acted to cool things down, would those soldiers have walked free that day? Picture a farmer in northern Burkina Faso. Not a leader. Not a soldier. Just someone measuring hope in harvests. Armed groups creep closer. Trucks stop coming. Fertilizer prices rise. Markets go quiet. Cooking oil gets rationed. His son asks if school is still safe. He hesitates. Now connect that life to Wuru. When soldiers cross borders and build positions, it is never just a security story. It becomes fear on the road. Fear in trade. Fear that keeps people home and poorer. The men with guns create the shock waves. Ordinary people live inside them. This is where the story shifts from 17 soldiers to justice. Border incidents in West Africa sit inside a long history where small nations are pressured, resources are priced elsewhere, and security is treated like a game board. Farmers can do everything right and still lose because distant power games disrupt roads, markets, and peace. So who is the enemy? Not Ghana. Not Burkina Faso. Not the individual soldiers stacking sandbags. The enemy is the system that turns African borders into pressure points. Where instability profits someone. Where fear lowers resistance. Where chaos makes influence easier. That is why Wuru unsettles people. Because when 17 soldiers cross a line and start building, it feels like a test. How far can we push? How fast will they respond? Will they escalate or retreat? That is how small nations get pressured. One test at a time. Until resistance becomes costly and submission feels normal.